say to criticisms that BBC is just another channel that represents the Western point of view, not necessarily British, but Western? It's the way how Western people would look at events that happen in Asia, in China, in India, or in Thailand.
I think that's a fair criticism. I think that's something we need to listen to. And we're recruiting teams in Asia. So, for instance, we're recruiting a business correspondent who's going to cover the world from Asia. We've been investing resources into our teams in Asia. We're doing a lot of work with our Asian language services for the reporters from those teams to also be broadcasting in English. So we have BBC teams from Burma, from Vietnam, from Indonesia, from China, from India. And those correspondents are increasingly appearing on the BBC's English language services. So I think it's right that we should reflect the world as it is. The world is more Asian than it used to be because of the changes that are happening in Asia, and the BBC needs to change to reflect that. So our roots are clearly in Europe, but we're a genuinely global organisation, and we need to reflect the world and have presenters and correspondents who come from the world that we're reporting.
Do you think more people are watching news today or watching less and watch more entertainment?
Well, certainly our audiences are larger than they've ever been. In the last couple of years, our audiences are almost 250 million people a week who come to the BBC. That's a pretty large audience by anyone's description. I think people are just consuming more media, but the news business, economically, it's got quite a tough time. But in terms of people watching and consuming news through all these different means, it's actually one of the most exciting times to be in the news business.
Why?
It really matters.
Why? Why do you think so? Why is it such an exciting time?
I think it's because the technology makes it possible to get all that information and that you can comment on it and you can respond to it. So it feels as though it's not just news that's coming at you, it's news that you can respond to. And it's also because of this connectedness in the world. Your job, your family's life is more affected by what happens in your neighbouring country or by other countries in the world than was ever the case 30 years ago. So if you're someone who's curious about the world, you should want to understand how the world is changing, and the news channels and the news environment is the place to get that information.
How's the BBC preparing for coverage of the Olympics in London?
Well, in London, it's hugely exciting at the moment. There's this sort of sense of mounting anticipation as the preparations really get underway. For us, the story is really of London as much as the Olympics. We're calling our coverage London Calling. So the idea that many people in the world are coming to London this summer. We're going to be hosting lots of discussions. We're going to be talking to people on the streets as they come to London and enjoy the excitement of the world's greatest capital city, a real melting pot of people from different parts of the world at any time. It's going to be even more exciting in London this July and August when the world descends on us.
And it's specific features that the BBC will broadcast for the Olympics?
As I say, it's mostly about the story of the people who are coming to London. Of course, we'll be covering the games themselves and reporting on those and giving people the results and all that information. But the really exciting story is that impact of the world arriving in London and the political things that might come from it. Obviously, we'll be looking at the security implications. You know, there's a lot of focus in the UK on making sure the games are as safe as possible. We'll be ready to respond to any events as they happen.
Financially, BBC doesn't have to worry about money because you got your funding from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, right?
Yes.
So you don't have
well,
to.
We
really
do have to worry about it a bit.
Oh,
and
really?
it was cut last year, and that was a worry. So we had to have some layoffs. And we do have commercial revenue as well. And so I have a responsibility to grow that commercial revenue as well as make sure that I spend the public money wisely.
But this model, the BBC model, being a public broadcaster and then having your funding from the government every year, in order to maintain your impartiality, does it actually work out the way it is intended to be, you know?
Well, many countries in the world, when they look at that and they see a part of the BBC, the World Service, being funded by the government, they say, how can it be that it's independent editorially and that the British government doesn't tell us what to do? All I have to say is, listen to what we broadcast, watch what we broadcast. Are we independent? Are we impartial? And in the time that I've been responsible for the World Service, I have never had a phone call from the British government saying, you must report this, you must report that. We're given the money and then told, you go and report the news as fairly and independently as you possibly can. And that's what we do.
Oh, really?
It really is like that. I mean, people are surprised. In many countries in the world, people expect that if the government pays, the government says. And that's not what happens with the BBC.
And not from corporations or from, I don't know, other parties as well, right?
No.
Within society.
People know that the BBC's reputation that we've been talking about, that reputation
Right.
for trust, has been built up over almost 100 years. If we threw it away by being biased in favour of the British government, or we took the side of one commercial organisation or another if they were advertising with us, that would destroy our reputation. And people in Britain realise how important that reputation is to the BBC and to Britain around the world. So we're committed to keeping that independence, and people understand that.
So you must have a very strong public check and balance as well, right, in Britain?
Yes, we have a governing body which is called the BBC Trust, whose job is to maintain the BBC's independence at all costs. So that commitment to impartiality and that commitment to our independence are the cornerstones of what we do. And you have to keep fighting for that independence.
Peter, you've been doing news for quite a while, about 20 years. What keeps you? It has been quite a long time, 20 years.
Well, it's because the world continues to be a fascinating place, doesn't it? I mean, the more it changes, the more interesting the news business becomes. And the speed of change in the world, the speed of technological change, the way the world impacts on itself is increasing, the intensity of change. And that means there's an even bigger job for journalists to do, and that's what keeps me motivated.
When the Thai audience watch BBC, what do you want them to think about when they think of BBC?
I want them to think we believe what we're watching, that we trust what we're watching. So whether it's reporting on Thailand, whether it's reporting on Asia, whether it's reporting on Europe, that they can look at it and think, there's a group of people here who are trying their best to tell the world truthfully and fairly what's really happening. That's all I'd ask for.
As the BBC, as well as other broadcasters, try to improve their programs, it's you, the audience, who would definitely benefit the most. See you next week. สวัสดีค่ะ